Welcome to Rauta's opinion video. Not too long time ago, I did a kind of a history slash opinion video about Paradise Lost. It was as much about the band's discography as well as music writing, as well as it was about my history with the band. I'm not saying I was playing in the band, but you get the idea. Being a long-time fan of the band while forgetting it some point and then refining it again and so forth. This time I'm gonna talk to you about Satyricon, the black metal band from Norway, which also released a new album in mid or maybe like near end of September 2017. Now, as you probably know if you have been following Norwegian black metal scene at all or black metal in general, that Satyricon is one of the maybe most valued black metal bands to come out of Norway, or at least it was for a very long time. And the band seems to know it as much as you can gather from reading or watching their interviews or reading reviews of Satyricon albums, or if you just take a look at these kind of top lists of like 90s black metal, especially if it's from Nordic countries, especially if it's from Norway. Satyricon is always, but often remembered as an important band, and it has a lot of history with the scene and so forth. There's no denying that Satyricon has been an influential band, and it has done a long career in the black metal scene. This time I'm going to talk about it a little bit because in the past few days I basically went through Satyricon discography, not only because of this video but also because I wanted to kind of reflect that discography upon the latest album which just came out. And to be blunt, to be honest about it, I think their latest album is just the weakest one. And since Satyricon has recorded quite a few albums, and there was 4 years before this Deep Calleth Upon Deep came out. There was 4 years ago came their Satyricon album, 2013. 5 years before that, The Age of Nero, a couple of years earlier, now Diabolical, and 7 years before that, Rebel Extravaganza. Oh, no, that was Volcano in 2002, sorry, 4 years there. 3 years earlier, is Rebel Extravaganza. 3 years before that, Nemesis Divina. A couple of years earlier, Shadow Throne, and before that, Dark Medieval Times. So, quite a few albums in 23 years, which is a long career, not to mention those few years before this first album, Dark Medieval Times, got out. So, Satyricon has done a lot. They have gone back and forth with musical style. They have created opera live albums, and they have said very weird things, be it online or on the magazine pages. It has clearly been one of the most interesting black metal bands. There was even this wine business which kind of created some kind of meme stuff on the social media at some point, and just simply been lots of fun stories about this band during the years. So when Dark Medieval Times got out in mid 90s, it was something that wasn't common at the time. Now, Dark Medieval Times, for many people feel that remember that album with lots of warmth in their heart, and feeling like, oh, it's such a great old school, but second wave black metal from Norway. That intro, the kind of a fast-paced riffs, that kind of a folkish elements, acoustic guitars, and those wonderful keyboards and all that. Well, a couple of years ago, I wrote a sort of classic review about it, and I felt that it didn't, had the same impact on me anymore than what it had back in the mid 90s, late 90s or so. Uh, I don't know if my musical taste has so much changed, really. I think it's more about, being more critical these days. And meanwhile, Dark Medieval Times is still clearly a good album. It's not. It doesn't feel as great that it used to be, or how I felt it used to feel in my mind back in the day. Back in the 90s or even early 2000 or whatever. So it's still a good album. It's a good debut, but sound-wise, it kind of feels old. And there are some kind of awkward ideas even that wouldn't get past my brain without a laughter, probably without a smile. It kind of feels like young guys are doing, even though they are doing kind of unique stuff. It's also kind of like yeah, there, give a pat on the head and feel like, guys, it's also nice, but isn't it a bit naive as well? Well, let that sink in for a while. That Medieval Times, good album, but it was clear that these guys had to evolve from that. Then came The Shadow Throne, which in some opinions is definitely the best uh, Satyricon albums. And meanwhile, it's not my favorite one. It's definitely the top two Satyricon albums. You can clearly hear those great ideas evolving from Dark Medieval Times. There are those, these kind of medieval black metal stuff, the acoustic guitars and the synths and great melodies and flute stuff and all kind of stuff that doesn't seem to have its place in Satyricon's nowadays music. It's an interesting album, and it's actually quite a great album as well. It's better than Dark Medieval Times, but there are still some weak moments, which when I was listening to it a couple of days ago, I felt like, did this actually have these ideas already when I was young? Yes, it did. Back then, they felt great, they felt new and stuff like that. Now it just feels like maybe they should have just, dropped some of those ideas off. I know some of these comments will probably make you angry, at least disagree with me. I'm totally fine with it. Shadow Throne, it's a good album. It's definitely still worth checking. It's just has some minor flaws. Nemesis Divina is something that can be argued about being the best Satyricon album, but it's also one of the albums which is kind of not in balance. I mean the first four tracks or so. And I actually remember having a conversation about it some 10 or 15 years ago when one of my friends actually said it's just, so great album. It's like the best, one of the best black metal albums ever. But then again, I was like, do you actually listen only the first songs or just the whole album? Because the album at first, the very first songs on the album, they're just killer tracks. It as if they had found the gold vein. It is just in like now they're really, really blooming, hot and all that stuff. But after the midpoint of the album, it just kind of gets lazy. It's as if you had this LP, which my friend then actually pointed out. He said that actually he plays it on the LP. So the first songs are just, golden. If you don't flip the LP over, to the B side, you just get the feeling that it's just, perfect black metal. But when you listen to the B side or the rest of the album, if it's on the CD, it's not actually that great. They are good in the sense of black metal, even maybe great in the sense of Satyricon, but they are not as great as the first four songs. Take my word for that. And even listen to it with your critical ear, so to speak. But in my opinion, it's still their peak moment, and it's also the moment when everything started, to turn downwards. So came the Rebel Extravaganza some 3 years later, and it seemed it was like totally different band. Sure, you got to hear the Frost playing the drums in his unique way, and he's so skilled drummer. And there is those great Satyr vocals, which I think are still one of the main factors, in Satyricon's music. I think he's a great, great vocalist. I think his voice is just amazing. It still is, even though the last album, the newest one, is the worst. But as a vocalist, he's just great. And Frost being this great drummer, he had learned probably some new tricks. So technical wise, Rebel Extravaganza is just a great album. But there's some major flaws. Well, not maybe major, but minor flaws at least. So the sound wise, meanwhile the first three ones had kind of like a warm feeling. This kind of like this even nostalgic feeling in a way. And they had this kind of folkish stuff going on. Suddenly, Rebel Extravaganza is like a totally different breed. It's modern, it's cold, it's even industrial. So much has changed. There are these certain riffs that only Satyricon plays, but still it feels like a side project of some sort. Anyway, still some great moments, but clearly not as great as any of those three albums before it. And when I took a look in my CD shelf, my collection, I didn't find it anymore, and I started to think I probably sold it a few years ago because I kind of felt that I don't actually need it. And when I just listened to it on Spotify a couple of days ago, I think, I actually, it was easy to reason why I had let it go. It wasn't that great, so by Rebel Extravaganza, quite good, but not as good enough it had to be to stay in my collection. Now, Volcano is like a twin brother to Rebel Extravaganza, only a bit better, which I think it was a bit weird because I was most certain that when Nemesis Divina was this peak point and then it started to decline, I was certain it would be all the way. But Volcano is like a bit like a minor bump up, and then it started to go down, which was a little bit of surprise. Volcano has clearly better riffs. It's better structured, and even though the sound wise it's like I said, it's a twin brother to Rebel Extravaganza. Good album, yeah. And in comparison to earlier the first three albums, I think it's pretty much on the same level as Dark Medieval Times, only totally different, like two different bands. But Volcano, in my opinion, still worth keeping in my CD shelf, at least for now. Then came Now Diabolical, which starts with strong tracks. And for a while I was wondering, why in the hell I don't have this CD on my shelf anymore? This is just too good to be true. I was cooking some food and listening to the music yesterday, and I was like, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to be this good. But it was only like 3 first tracks, I think, before it all started to go down. And then I was like, yeah, now I remember why I don't have it. The thing is, while Now Diabolical has certain one of the better moments of this modern Satyricon, which I think started with Rebel Extravaganza, it's still very kind of like unstable. I don't know if I can use the word here, but it's kind of it's not a very balanced album. It has few strong tracks which are like good for a collection or compilation or whatever, but as a whole album it's not gonna cut it. It's quite okay, it's decent to give it a shot in every once in a 10 years or so, but in my opinion, sorry Satyricon, it's not gonna cut it anymore. Too bad, because it's clearly has those few great tracks. And then it started to get way worse. The Age of Nero, I remember when I got that review CD, it just kind of became like a flashback. It was some 10 years ago. And I had this great looking promo package with some like, there was this actually this kind of like a 7-inch packaging, but there was a CD inside or something like, oh, cool, this is something unusual. Because usually you get like, you know, normal jewel case CD or digipack or whatever, it's just CD. But there was like something cool. I think it was like a single or EP before the actual CD came out. But anyway, it looked cool, and I was like, yeah, maybe they're trying to, you know, get this back to this better vibe after the okay, no diabolical, but anyway. And what a disappointment it was. It was clear to me from the very beginning that it was not as good as No Diabolical, not to mention the CDs before it. And after a few spins, I felt it like, yeah, this is okay. This is definitely Satyricon. This is modern Satyricon when it comes to the sounds, the riffs, everything. But it also felt like now this band is not going to recover. It is okay album, but it's not good. It's nothing, you know, like memorable. It's not worth, you know, like give it a spin. Yeah, it has a few good tracks, but it doesn't. Everything is just, you know, like it tries to get there so hard, but it never makes it. They're not single track, which I would, you know, wave my flag for. It's just, you know, better than average, maybe, yeah, when it comes to black metal, but still, it's not a good album. It's okay-ish album. So, when the so-called S/T, this self-titled album, came out, there was no huge expectations from my part anyway. And what I remember is that it felt like, yeah, this is Age of Nero all over again. Maybe even a bit weaker this time. But there was this one track that clearly made it memorable. And this was this Phoenix track, which you probably, if you have ever listened to late Satyricon, you have certainly heard it. And it doesn't sound Satyricon at all. And that's the weird thing, because it's probably the best track on the album, or at least the most memorable one. When I was listening to it earlier today, prior to making this video, it felt like, yeah, it's so sad, that song that, you know, isn't Satyricon at all. It almost like sounds like a cover song, is probably the best track on it. It's not a great track per se, but it has kind of a nice vibe. But it's such a weird song to have it on this album. It feels almost like the song is there only for the purpose of, you know, standing out from the crowd. Which makes no sense, by the way. It's in the middle of the album, and it's just like this lonely penguin amongst other birds. And, you know, it's just like, what the hell is it doing here? Thing is, until the latest one came out, I thought that it couldn't get much worse, because, you know, the last three albums had been, you know, repeating these really average Satyricon riffs with not so great ideas anymore. Not bad ones, but still, you know, like it felt like the band has lost its groove. You know, it was like they are not, you know, making those great riffs anymore, which was the case with Nemesis Divina, Shadowtron, and so forth. It felt like this is like the leftovers of Rebel Extravaganza and Volcano, you know, the leftover riffs that are like, oh shit, we gotta use them because I don't have any more riffs in my brain anymore. Let's just put them together. And the result is, you know, having way too long songs, too much repetition, too much average showed stuff, and, you know, kind of a boring production. And the same happened again with the latest album. I'm not gonna deep in review, because that's gonna be a whole different story when I get the CD here. I'm gonna do a full review if ever I get the CD after doing this. But the thing is, deep calleth upon deep. is their weakest link so far in my opinion, and thus I have lost hope for Satyricon. The sad thing is that their first 3 to 5 first albums, they're just good. They're solid black metal, even though they differ from each other. And even though I don't have Rebel Extravaganza anymore, I still think those 5 first albums are the stuff. Some people just go with the first 3, or maybe just Nemesis Divina or Shadow Throne. Doesn't matter. The thing is, they used to be a great band, but what a fall from grace. Who knows what happens in the future? At least my expectations won't be anywhere high when the next album comes in next 10 years or so. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, what's your story with Satyricon? What made you fall in love with the band or hate the band? There's so many stories that feel free to fire it up. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, like, dislike, or shoot your comments below. I'm eager to hear your story of Satyricon and your favorite album. So, until next video, stay metal.